Hey everybody, my name is Chris Carl. I'm a computer science master's student here at San Jose State University for the graduate year of 2027, and I'd like to present my preliminary literature review on data, its ontology, its valuation, and some of the ethics. I hope you'll come with me for the ride. So the question is, what is data? You might be asking, why not just study the thing you're actually interested in, artificial intelligence? And I thought about that at first, but after studying data itself, the fundamentals, I still came away with a wealth of literature out there. And what I found is that you could categorize it into many different taxonomies, but ultimately there's still no consensus. If someone were to ask you what is data, you would still get multiple answers, and I found that interesting and worth exploring. So let's contextualize this differently. Raise your hand out there in the audience if you have run a marathon without learning how to walk first. You've run before you've walked. Raise your hand. Probably not very many of you, and the reason for that is depending on your fundamental assumptions, depending on your training, depending on your primary point of reference, you wind up at different conclusions. If you wanted to kill cancer and study it, you wouldn't study the cancer cell at the highest abstraction level, you would study its fundamentals and kill it at the source. And I think the same problem is happening here with artificial intelligence. We're not studying its foundation. So let's talk about that. Let's remind and do some refresher. Like in your mind, there's probably an intuition that data has somehow changed or somehow we've moved on from talking about it. Let's look back to the 90s. It started with statistics. Then in the 2000s, every company that had a .com website was suddenly something worth investing in. That evolved then into data-driven and SEO optimization, which then evolved into social media and big data. I bet you remember that term from several years ago. It has since been wiped away by artificial intelligence. So what changed? Did data change, or did our understanding and interest about it change? And that's what I wanted to investigate. So in the literature, there are multiple people have said that there are different categories, more than 3, less than 3, whatever. For the purposes of this literature review, I wanted to categorize it into 3. So data as a commodity, which is something, a good that can be bought or sold like oil or wheat. An intangible asset, something like an intellectual property, which can show up on a revenue report but isn't actually physical. And then finally, data as new capital, something nice and radical to round out the ethical discussion. So for example, in the commodity assumption, they assume first, the following researchers, O et al., Zhao et al., and Tian et al., they assume that data is a commodity first. It is something you can buy and sell. Therefore, their research is based on marketplaces around to buy and sell things. O et al., they defined a want to buy and a want to sell model. Zhao et al., they conducted a literature review that collected about 20 different marketplaces and research papers into this single idea. It was very helpful. And then Tian et al., they developed an entire ecosystem based on the Shapley value. Highly advanced economic theory, but the idea is to create a marketplace with arbitrage-free pricing. So again, assuming that you have a commodity as data, the results of your study is going to be about its marketplace. If instead you assume that it's an intangible asset, like number 7, the World Intellectual Property Organization, they assume that data is an intangible asset. And from that, Xiong et al., Choi and Gambari, Zhujiang et al., they studied data and ultimately came up with, let's regulate data based on this fact that it's somehow an asset. So for Xiong et al., they suggest encouraging regulation based around CAS, IFRS, and the USSS GAAP. Accounting methodologies. Again, this is about accounting since we're dealing with assets. For Choi and Gambari, they use the Black-Scholes model. And they think of how about we regulate data pricing as options contracts in the same way that you deal with options in a stock market. And then for Zhujiang et al., they worked on a genetic algorithm backpropagation model. And from there, they decided to estimate what the asset value of data was going to be. Now, for those who are in the critical camp, we have Sadowski, Zuboff, and Alexander. Alexander is a professor here at San Jose State University, and they all come up with this idea that data has actually replaced money in the capitalism framework of today. So capitalism is about capital, but is that capital about money or about data? For Sadowski, he posits that data has replaced money in the capitalism. And from that, since it is still a capitalism, you still get all the benefits and all the side effects, including things like labor exploitation. Zuboff, she ended up analyzing something called surveillance capitalism, which is the idea that instead of just simply buying and selling, you're actually augmenting and focusing on generating stuff based on surveillance. rather than Google being selling a product for search engines, they're actually productizing you from using that search engine, which is a total inversion of the market. And Alexander noted that between EULA agreements and then earnings reports, the difference in language ended up creating a gap of value, so that during the earnings report, when all the hype is happening, that's when the money flows, rather than during the end user license agreements. And that gap is fictitious. That value is fictitious, but still shows up in earnings reports. So everyone agrees, data doesn't follow the rules like money used to. Something is different, but if you're in STEM, you tend to think that data should be analyzed based on pricing, and that's it. Which is a perfectly fine way to analyze things, but it ends up narrowing your focus into, let's study marketplace ideas. Whereas for the STEAM folks, who are the social scientists and the political scientists and sociologists, they might be more interested in saying, okay, what are the effects of dataism? Data capitalism, surveillance capitalism, and so forth. So here's where I come down. I am more compelled by the third categorization, which is that data has replaced money in capitalism. We have entered the age of the new Leviathan, which means that we are going to experience new ill effects as well as some positive effects. And I think that the next step should include a full, proper literature review, not just in the 200s, but maybe in the 400s or 500s worth of literature papers, because we need to develop a true full taxonomy, finally settle the marketplace question, which will take a lot of economic talent, and then also establish the full history, because most of the research that I presented here is in the last 5 years alone. It doesn't go back all the way to the 90s, and we certainly have data has been with us ever since the 1800s, since as far back as you like to think. So I'd like to thank you for listening to this presentation. Here are the references that I use for the text, and then I use Adobe stock images for Adobe stock for the images. Thank you so much, and I welcome your questions.